Welcome to Politically Georgia from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I'm Greg Bluestein here with Patricia Murphy. Hey, Patricia.
Hey, Greg.
Hope you weren't flying this weekend.
Thankfully, I was not, but others were not so lucky.
Yeah, well, we're going to start there. Something just about every Georgian can relate to right now, those massive lines at Hartsfield-Jackson. If you weren't in them, you know someone who was. What began as a travel nightmare is now a full-blown political fight with implications stretching from Washington straight into Georgia's Senate race. It's one of those rare moments where a federal funding fight becomes very real, very fast. Hours-long waits, missed flights, thousands, tens of thousands of frustrated travelers, all at the world's busiest airport. And the backdrop here is the partial government shutdown tied to funding for the Department of Homeland Security. We're taping this on a Monday around noon, and the impasse is continuing. TSA workers aren't getting paid. Some are calling out sick. Others are just quitting. And suddenly you've got this bottleneck that's rippling across the country, but especially here in Atlanta. Patricia, what a mess.
It is such a mess. Also, I think there's plenty of blame to go around for everybody involved in this debate. I have been getting a lot of questions from people like, whose fault is this? Who am I officially supposed to be furious with because of this just chaotic situation that we're seeing unfold at the Atlanta airport and at other airports around the country? This, of course, all goes back to a congressional fight over the future of ICE. Democrats want to see some new regulations and changes to the way ICE operates around the country. That was all flowing out of the really terrible situation in Minneapolis. Among those changes, they want to make sure that agents are not wearing masks. Democrats are also looking for changes to and requirements for serving warrants in order to go into people's houses with ICE. So that's the debate. However, the leverage Democrats have gotten and that they've sought is the funding for the entire Homeland Security Department. That includes TSA. So TSA is unfunded right now because of this fight over ICE. At the same time, ICE has been fully funded by a different bill. And so you start to look at a situation where TSA agents, members of the Coast Guard, a whole lot of people who work for Homeland Security are not getting paid despite the fact they have literally nothing to do with Democrats' complaints. Democrats have offered a standalone bill to fund only TSA or fund everything except ICE in the Homeland Security bill, and Republicans have rejected that. So
multiple times.
And it looked like there could have been a breakthrough last night or over the weekend with John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, telling the president, looks like we've got a deal. And the president said, I don't want a deal anymore. I want to force Democrats to pass an elections overhaul bill, having nothing to do with anything. And so we've got a situation where there's a lot of leverage being sought and this unbelievable situation where American travelers and TSA agents are caught in the crossfire.
Meanwhile, there's nightmarish situations at airports across the country, including here in Atlanta. AJC's Shaddi Abusaid is down there at the airport giving us the latest. Shaddi, what's it look like?
Well, it's pretty busy. I got here early this morning about 7:45, and the line at the North Security checkpoint was backed all the way out the door and into the sidewalk, and onto the sidewalk. And there was a man in a yellow vest, letting folks know it'd be about 4.5, 5 hours to get through security.
Was it actually that long? Was it really 4 to 5 hours? I know TSA has put out alerts saying it could be at least 4 hours on Monday morning.
Yeah, it seems. I was here yesterday too, and it seems to be moving a little bit quicker than it was, Sunday evening. But it's at least 2 or 3 hours as far as I can tell, and it snakes around every baggage carousel in the terminal.
Shaddi, another development at the beginning this week was that the president sent ICE agents who are getting paid to the Atlanta airport. They said in order to do everything besides screening passengers, things like crowd control, sending people in the right direction. Have you seen ICE agents at the Atlanta airport? And what does that look like? And is that causing any kind of tension, or how's it playing out?
The ICE agents have been here all morning. I'm not seeing them interact directly with any passengers, though. They seem to be kind of on their own, in the corner, on their phones. I'm not seeing any direct interaction between any of the ICE agents and any travelers.
Wow.
What are travelers telling you?
Well, they're some of them are actually kind of close. They're arriving, what you would typically get there, a couple hours early for a normal flight, and they're kind of pushing it. I talked to one woman today, and she was with her band, and they just come from North Florida. They performed at the North Florida Renaissance Festival, and they were called Nordic Daughter was the name of the band. But they cut it kind of short. They said, Atlanta's airport was a lot busier than Denver's, where they'd come from originally.
The TSA lines in Denver were nothing. We got it in and out in 5 minutes. And so we were like, oh, these shutdowns are nothing. It's not going to be a problem at all. Hi, Atlanta.
Wow. Hi, Atlanta. My wife flew out of Miami on Sunday, and it was easy, right? But Atlanta, when she got there, she was like, holy crap. Shaddi, why has Atlanta become this sort of flashpoint?
I think it's just because it's such a busy airport. There's so many people coming and going. It's such a big connecting hub. And I think that's why we're seeing these impacts here more than other airports across the country.
And Shaddi, are you learning anything for people who might be going to the airport? Either is there a special back door they can use? Is there a special line they could think about? Is there any way to make this easier on travelers who are just looking at these lines and wondering even just how early should they get there?
Well, I was roaming around a few minutes ago, and while the North and South security checkpoints were, 4 or 5 hours, the TSA pre-check line was only 90 minutes. So if you've got that, it seems to be helpful for the folks who have it.
Well, Shaddi, we're going to let you get back to answering questions from and asking questions of angry passengers waiting in those hours-long lines. Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. Thanks for having me up.
Of course. Well, Patricia, this is obviously spilling over into Georgia politics as well. It seemed like Hartsfield-Jackson became like a campaign stop over the weekend. We saw Derek Dooley there. We saw Mike Collins there. They're both Republicans running to compete for the Republican nomination against John Ossoff. And they're, of course, finger pointing directly at John Ossoff. Dooley took it a step further also by blaming Washington writ large. That's sort of his MO. It's Democrats, but it's also Washington's fault.
Well, Derek Dooley isn't wrong on that one. I mean, this is just the most visual, vivid example of Congress and the president's dysfunction at this point. Washington has become so calcified, so incapable of solving problems, and there is actually an incentive politically, and you see this from Carter and Collins, to highlight problems and even prevent problems from being solved if it's not on your terms. So there's just no incentive for compromise, and there's a lot of incentive for highlighting what's not working and without really putting forward a solution about how to make it work better. It's just, to me, it's a huge low point for Washington and Congress writ large. And again, there really is plenty of blame to go around. You could, even if the Georgia delegation came forward with a bipartisan solution, they would have the votes to move this stalemate forward. And you just don't see that coming through right now.
Yeah, this is one of those stalemates that just feels like we're having over and over again. We had a record-long shutdown just a few months ago. Now we have this. It feels like the dysfunction of Washington has reached a new level. If all Senate Republicans vote for the House-passed bill to fund the Department of Homeland Security, it could still pass with the support of 7 Democrats. And up until Monday afternoon, as far as right when we're recording this, Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania is the only who have crossed party lines. Senators Ossoff and Warnock, 2 Georgia Democrats, say that's not part of their fight. Ossoff, for instance, blamed Republicans and President Trump for the disruption. He said Donald Trump's obstruction is denying TSA workers pay and creating havoc at airports. While negotiations continue over ICE, there's no reason TSA should be held hostage. That's the Democratic line right now.
Yeah, and they don't have this infinite amount of time to deal with the situation. There is a 2-week congressional recess scheduled for the end of this week, and there is a chance that Congress goes home without dealing with this situation. And it's just so important to note that people are flying for all kinds of reasons, and they're important reasons. They are flying for their businesses. They're flying to go see sick family members. They're flying, even if they're on vacation for spring break, they've got their kids with them. This is just so unfair to do to passengers. Greg, do you have a sense of who is getting more blamed? Does anybody feel like they're going to blink pretty soon here?
You see the narratives on social media, right? It's interesting because you see viral tweets from both sides of the aisle about the long lines. Thank John Ossoff, thank Raphael Warnock for this, or you have thank Donald Trump for this, right? So you're seeing the battle over the narrative shaping out. Here's the message that Senate Republicans are pushing out about John Ossoff right now.
Attention travelers, and welcome to Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Whether you're heading home or just passing through, we hope you enjoy your extended stay in the security line. This delay is courtesy of Senator John Ossoff. While you wait, take a moment to thank Senator Ossoff for blocking funding for the Transportation Security Administration and the United States Coast Guard, putting Americans at greater risk, both in the air and here at home. Thanks to John Ossoff, disruptions from the government shutdown are now slowing travel through America's busiest airport. So sit back, relax, and get comfortable. You may be here a while.
So the messaging game is really ratcheting up. Some Republicans are willing to support the plan to separate funding for TSA from the broader immigration fight, but this all starts and ends with President Trump, who Sunday night basically said that he has little appetite for any sort of compromise. He wants it to tie into the federal election overall, the SAVE Act. The Democrats, of course, staunchly oppose.
I just don't feel like the political system is going to tolerate this much discomfort, this much visual discomfort much longer. To see these lines in Atlanta, to hear the stories of people who are missing their flights, there is enough blame to go around, but eventually people who have gotten themselves elected to Congress to solve problems are going to have to solve this problem. As much as Republicans can blame Senator Ossoff and other Democrats are turning right back around and saying, first of all, you could negotiate on these ICE reforms that they're asking for. Second of all, we put up a standalone TSA funding bill and the Republicans blocked that. So there's just a lot of gamesmanship going on right now and very little appetite to really kind of put down each other's rhetorical weapons and get to a deal. And
then, when we talked to Shaddi and we heard from passengers, they don't care who's to blame. They don't care what the finger. They just want TSA agents paid, and they want to go back to their hour-and-a-half lines, not the 3-hour lines, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think also for Republicans, they're in charge of both houses of Congress and the White House. And this is another chaotic scene playing out under the president's administration. And there have been so many of them. I think that's why Democrats feel pretty emboldened to keep pushing this. But again, they're going to start to hear from their constituents, continue to hear from their constituents that people need and want a resolution to this very, very soon.
Yeah, it's one thing to see chaos. It's another thing that's chaos that seems very avoidable.
Yeah.
Well, Patricia, we'll keep following this story. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to dive into another transportation story, rising gas prices. This is Politically Georgia from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Welcome back to Politically Georgia from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I'm Greg Bluestein here with Patricia Murphy. Gas prices are spiking across Georgia, up nearly $1 in just a few weeks. And now Governor Brian Kemp is stepping in with what's become a familiar playbook, moving to ease the pain at the pump. He just signed a measure to temporarily suspend the state's gas tax again.
It will suspend our state's motor fuel tax for 60 days upon my signature. In the coming days and weeks, as retailers get new shipments of motor fuel, those prices on the billboards will not include the 33-cent excise tax on gasoline and the 37-cent tax on diesel fuel.
But don't expect that relief overnight. It could take days to show up at the pump, and if oil prices keep climbing, that savings could shrink just as quickly. There's also a lot we don't know. How long global supply disruptions will last, whether prices stabilize or keep rising. And under the gold dome, the big question is what comes next. If prices stay high, the pressure builds for lawmakers to extend the suspension again or find another way to deliver relief, because politically, few issues hit voters as directly or as fast as the price of gas. So how did this measure come together and what happens next? We're joined now by the bill's sponsor, State Representative John Carson. Representative Carson, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, this started as a routine tax conformity bill. Walk us through when and why you decided to add the gas tax suspension and really what that means for Georgia drivers.
Absolutely, yes. So again, thank you for having me. Yes, this is typically just an tax accountant's bill, but it came much more impactful this time around. HB 1199 had a provision added to it to suspend, as you mentioned, suspend the gas tax for 60 days. This is on gasoline and diesel. We believe we needed to do something to provide more relief to Georgia families because so many people were seeing maybe $1 increase in their gasoline at the pump, either gasoline and actually even more, Greg, for diesel. And so we wanted to do this to provide some relief during this time of the Middle East tension and so forth and the constraint on oil supplies. And we feel it's the right thing to do.
And what is that going to mean for Georgia drivers, both those who have diesel gas and regular? When will they start to see those savings? And will it be exactly the amount of the gas tax, which is 33 cents for regular and 37 cents for diesel?
Well, again, these prices go, they change every day. I will tell you the fuel prices at my local filling station probably change every 48 hours, thereabouts. It's also subject to supply and demand and crude oil prices and so forth. What I would say is the tax is actually assessed at the distributor level. So so the tax actually is 33.4 cents for gasoline. It's actually 37.3 cents for diesel. So you're not going to see an exact 33.4 decrease in the gasoline tax. That's going to be subject to distributor time to get that untaxed gasoline to the filling stations. It's going to be the prices will be subject to that, as well as, again, supply and demand, both in that little market where your gas filling station is, but also crude oil prices overall worldwide.
Do you worry that some retailers won't fully pass along the savings?
I would. Not really, no, because they're all trying to be competitive in a free market and they want to offer the lowest price possible. So if they kept their prices higher, Greg, by 30 cents, they're going to sell less gasoline. Let's be honest.
So the governor has suspended the gas tax in the past. He's done that with the legislature when y'all are in session. Do you feel like there's any way to know what's ahead if it looks like there needs to be another extension 60 days from now? Obviously, the legislature will be out of session. What would that look like?
That's right. So constitutionally, while we're in session, only the General Assembly can suspend the gas tax. And we have elected to do so. That's already been codified, just as you mentioned, and that started as of Friday. If the governor, while we're out of session, when that ends, May, I guess it's 18th, depending on how the calendar goes, when the governor has the ability by executive order to extend that for 30 days, 60 days, what have you, he can potentially do that.
So let's talk brass tacks. This could cost the state hundreds of millions of dollars in lost revenue. Of course, saving drivers the same amount.
That's right.
So you can't forget that. But that's money that normally goes to roads and bridges, infrastructure. How do you justify that trade-off?
I think it's a trade-off in regard to this is something that we're doing temporarily. Doing this temporarily to provide much needed relief to Georgia drivers. You were correct that this will cost approximately $200 million per month. It cost about $186 million in February as far as receipts. I think it's by the time we get into driving season, right, in May or what have you, they could easily go over $200 million. But there's a fair amount in that fund right now, and I think it's a trade-off, honestly, between having more trust funds in our transportations. Infrastructure accounts versus relief to Georgia drivers.
Yeah, and it's really not just for drivers. Also, when you start to talk to truck drivers or professional drivers, I saw on the news the other day, it can cost $1,500 per tank of gas now that the prices have gone up so quickly. And of course, those prices can be passed on to consumer goods, whatever's being delivered on a truck or in anything that uses fuel, that can trickle down as well. So I
would say depending on the capacity of those rigs, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you take a look at, I usually pay somewhere around $3.60 per gallon for gasoline up in my area in Cobb County. If you're looking at diesel, you're probably looking at about $4.20 a gallon, something like that, maybe $4 a gallon. And if you can take 37 cents off of that and multiply it by how many gallons the driver needs, it's going to be some significant savings.
We've just been here talking about how Congress seems incapable of solving anybody's problems lately. I do think it
We
is
can have a whole
refreshing.
segment on that.
It's refreshing that we have a legislative body. There's so little that anybody can do to affect the price of gas right now because of everything that's going on around in the world. And the legislature and the governor have actually done this. So I would like to say thank you on behalf of my wallet and the wallets of other Georgians.
Absolutely. Glad to do so. Thank
You've
you.
been down here for years. You've been in the middle of all these thorny fights. Have you ever had a bill move this quickly? This was what, 3 days when it was law?
It must just be a great idea.
It certainly gained some attention, including from you guys in the media. So, no, I really appreciate it. And I will say the underlying bill had to do with IRC conformity. And this is so important because it allows our CPAs and our tax preparers, tax software to finally get this right, finally have a set of tax laws to which we can file returns, we can get refunds, we can get the surplus payments paid, all of it.
Are you suggesting we wouldn't normally cover that underlying bill?
Oh, no, Greg. I think you would always carry a CPA's bill.
What's your message to Georgians if prices continue to either stay the same or even rise based on the international price of crude oil?
I would say us on our side of the aisle, and I would say this was a unanimous vote on both chambers. But I can say this is something that we feel very passionate about in regard to not just any time that we want to do it, but in the time of all of this spike in oil prices, spike in gasoline and diesel prices during what we think is a temporary, I hope it's a temporary time in regard to the Middle East tension. Hopefully we can provide some relief, much needed relief to Georgia drivers.
We're barreling towards sine die. Any other bills?
That's a good pun, by the way.
Yeah, you like it? I planned that for a while. Any last minute issues you think could crop up that you're watching very closely?
We're very interested in the Georgia literacy bill. I think that's very important to get kids reading on grade level sooner rather than later. We saw Mississippi do this, and they went from about 48th to about 9th in reading comprehension. And I know that's something you very much take care about.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I didn't mean to interrupt you with my hand gesture, which is what I just did to you. But what's the problem with the literacy bill? Because it has sailed through the House and it looks like it could be running into trouble in the Senate.
I have not kept it. I really focus more on tax issues and insurance and stuff and retirement. I couldn't answer that, but I'm hoping there's something we can get this done through the Senate.
An artful dodge by Representative John Carson.
I really don't know. I have to ask the Senate.
Thanks so much for joining us, Representative.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Politically Georgia. If you enjoy what you heard, please follow, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform and share Politically Georgia with a friend. It helps others find the show and join our conversation. We'll talk to you next time on the Politically Georgia podcast from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Thanks for listening to the Politically Georgia podcast. Our executive producer is Shane Backler. AJC's head of audio is Sam Stamler. Production support from our partners at Goat Rodeo, including Kara Schillen, Hazel Hoffman, and Max Johnston. For more of our political coverage, visit ajc.com/politicallygeorgia, and we invite you to support local journalism by subscribing to the AJC. Join us again next time on the Politically Georgia podcast from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.